So if this turns out to be true, then Ferrari could be denied the final piece of their lovely puzzle, and Aston Martin might have secured its latest plaything. And that number I put in the title of the video? That's the compromised figure. After a quiet few weeks on the subject, talks about the comings and goings of Adrian Newey have resurfaced, with Aston Martin up in the ante when it comes to the designer's ultimate destination for what would most likely be his final stint within F1. For those of you thinking that Adrian Newey would retire, think again, because Eddie Jordan, how is he going to make his money? I still can't believe that Eddie Jordan is Adrian Newey's manager. 3 teams have been really vying for Adrian Newey's attention, with McLarenand Mercedes sort of wanting things to play out in the background. They're not overly interested, they're quite happy with what they've got, with Ferrari being talked about all of the time. There's been reports about Adrian Newey's wife seeking to find property within Italy, potentially for a possible commute, as well as Fred Vasseur having a secret meeting with him in London on the way to the Miami Grand Prix. Aston Martin had been mooted every now and again, but after a few months it sort of just went into the background, but not anymore. Papa Stroll has waded in again, and when I look back at the thing and really researching for this video, it does make a fair lick of sense, more so than I think Ferrari. Even though one multiple world champion would love to work with the designer and never got the chance to, we might see an equally similar situation, with another multiple world champion getting the chance to work with his dream designer, having been snubbed at, both at the same team. It's wild. Adrian Newey left McLaren in 2006, and both Alonso and Hamilton moved into that team the following year and missed out by just that much. The coincidences and the similarities are crazy. Not to mention, I think Dan Fallows is quaking in his boots because he was the Red Bull signing, the dream one that Papa Stroll thought he had after a 2023 campaign which was strong, and then turned out not to be. And if things are meant to be believed from the rumours that the Telegraph has acquired, then the original offer, probably from Eddie Jordan himself to Aston Martin for Adrian's services, given that the last pay increase that Adrian had was about nearly 20 years ago, is maybe a cool $50 million per season. No, I didn't misspeak, nor did I leave a flub in. I didn't say 15, I said 50. 50. And not even Papa Stroll was prepared to part with that amount of cash. They've reportedly compromised on maybe $25 million, which is actually bigger than the combined salaries of Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. It's not that far-fetched, considering that the last time that Adrian Newey had a salary discussed was back in 2006 when he joined Red Bull for about $10 million or so per year, which at the time was not that bad considering his pedigree. And now we're about 15 years or so later, and he has accrued far more drivers' championships and now another constructors. His value has increased, and everybody wants him. And not to mention that Eddie Jordan will be getting a huge commission bonus from it, with Business F1 reporting £4 million or so. But remember, this is Business F1. This is the same publication that came out with the Toto Wolff pillow talk. I wouldn't trust that publication one iota. But I do believe that Eddie Jordan is Adrian Newey's manager. He will get some hefty commission from it, but just not $4 million. What makes this situation regarding Adrian Newey's future all the more compelling is the recent revelation that he took a tour around the Silverstone factory a couple of weeks ago, with it only leaking now since team staff were instructed, according to motorsport.com, to leave the building so as to not spread leaks any sooner. Although they have spread, but let's be real, Formula One trying to keep a secret, it's increasingly becoming more and more difficult because, the whole Toto Lewis thing, that got out within 48 hours of Toto even finding out. I personally think that Wolff let it slip, but we don't know for sure. So 2 weeks? That's not bad by keeping things stum. Now, I thought I would have been surprised by this news when I first saw it. Adrian Newey going to the Aston Martin factory? Well, as more time has progressed and the more time I've thought about it, it's really become not all that surprising because everyone thinking, oh, Adrian's going to go to Ferrari to become the super team, the ultimate technical director, being part of the Scuderia, he will bring Lewis Hamilton yet another world title. Well, I'm really not thinking that anymore, and I think it's simply down to the fact that I think Ferrari's already got themselves a pretty good technical director in the form of Enrico Cardile. And if you think I'm just coming out of this out of my bottom, Enrico Cardile was also approached by Aston Martin with a serious bid to become their technical director. He's been able to make the SF24 work wonders, having been appointed to the role last year as technical director, having worked with Ferrari for 20 years and in the F1 space for a good chunk of that time. It's quite clear that Fred Vasseur wants to build a really strong, solid team to complement John Elkann's lofty ambitions with getting big-name stars such as Lewis Hamilton to come their way. Enrico Cardile has been part of the Ferrari community and family for a good long time and knows how the Scuderia works and the Ferrari culture, which is very, very important. Even though Vasseur is looking to evolve things, he is also respecting the history and traditions of the Italian team. So, Enrico Cardile being brought up to the role of technical director last year, we were starting to see really strong improvements when it comes to the upgrades, and this year has proven to be even more effective. So why would they want to replace Cardile when he's only just started just for the sake of getting a big superstar name? Not to mention, Cardile is probably a lot cheaper and is already well established within the team, so I don't see any need to change it at the moment. Not to mention the fact that Rory Byrne, the legendary designer from the Schumacher era, is still on tap on the consultancy basis for Ferrari, so even though John Elkann will bend over backwards to appease the likes of Lewis Hamilton, I don't really see them needing Newey anymore. So if Adrian Newey does go to Aston Martin and Papa Stroll denies Fred Vasseur and John Elkann Adrian Newey services, I don't particularly think they're going to lose much sleep over it, because so far they've got something that works well, and also, very important here, the technical director who's doing very well is Italian. Yeah, okay, I get it. If Adrian Newey did go there, it would be an absolute coup, but the honeymoon period would probably be over very quickly, because the amount of upheaval it would require to get him working there would be quite notable. With Christian Horner coming out after, of course, Newey left to really make him not look so good and a bit difficult and underplay his services, that, oh, we had to bend over backwards to cater to Newey's needing to use a drawing board and pencil and not using computers. You can easily tell that Horner's just going, yeah, he's not actually that worthy, he's kind of difficult. And Ferrari would have to deal with that. Newey's family would have to move to Italy, and that would be a major cultural shift. And it's something that Newey has said in the past had discouraged him from joining Ferrari any sooner. That problem is still there. And also there is the idea of how is it going to work? Not just the whole idea of a technical pencil or anything, but just the culture of Ferrari and expecting things to be immediately fast from the get-go. To appease what Ferrari wants, he would have to act quickly. And Red Bull, it took him a long time. The RB3, his first Red Bull car, didn't set the world alight. It took a couple of years before results came their way fully. It's quite clear that Ferrari is in a hurry to try and topple Red Bull and become the team to beat in 2025 and 2026. And I don't think they would want to wait for Adrian Newey to get settled in and then have his first car be ready for 2026. It may or may not work. And so far, you might just want to have constancy and continuity, stability, and Cardile is probably very savvy to what's going on with Ferrari's future, so just keep the guy. Not everybody has to be a big superstar name, they just need to be good at their job and already know what to do with their job. But the fact that we're still talking about him and he's got so many options, Adrian Newey's not going to leave F1. He's too wanted, he's too high in demand. And yeah, even though he's got a big boat to think about, yeah, there are still many things keeping him around. Because not only is Newey interested in Formula 1 still, but he's taken a look at the 2026 regulations and not necessarily condemned them. Although initially he was a little bit sketchy about them and it was making things a little bit more awkward. But his comments more recently have turned to a sense of optimism, as he was telling Motorsport Week the other day. Ahem. At the moment, they look a slightly strange set of regulations, but to write them off and say therefore they won't be good, it's way too premature. There comes a point where always as a designer you first look at what they might be, and you might then have an opinion, are they good or are they bad, but at some point you have to ignore that and just get on with the challenge of it. So with that sentiment in mind, I can see why he hasn't overtly rejected Aston Martin or any other deal, with only the desire for a challenge being publicly stated. So in theory, any team could possibly get him. Yes, I am aware about the situation with Williams, and even though it does make for a nice poetic story, sometimes the nice poetic stories don't play out the way you expect them to. And Williams probably does have a tall order in trying to secure somebody who probably won't be going for any less than maybe 15 million quid a year, and that's money that Williams does not have right now. Even though Doralton, their investors, have big pockets, do they really have that many big pockets, and also there's the cost cap to consider. Yeah, it's an ambitious move, Williams, but Aston Martin, they have the cash, and yes, it might affect their cost cap as well, but I don't think Papa Stroll cares. He wants the team to be as good as possible, throw money at the issue. But to be fair, their facilities are impressive enough, and they're ready to go, and their own wind tunnel's coming online in the next few months or so you never know. And Fernando has already expressed a desire to work with him, and Newey has actually reciprocated, having joined McLaren the year after Newey left for Red Bull. For the website Mundo Deportivo, the Spaniard spent a good chunk of the interview gushing about Newey and how he likes him very much. And that, out of all of the people he has contested against in Formula 1, he considers Adrian Newey to be one of his biggest rivals, not necessarily in terms of driving on the track, but in the cars that he designed. The 2010 and the 2012 Red Bulls being the ones that denied Fernando the opportunity to go for those world titles. Had those Red Bull cars not been around, then Fernando might be sitting pretty on maybe 4 or 5 championships. Alonso's even written the foreword to the Spanish edition of one of Adrian Newey's books. And writing the foreword for a book, that's not something you throw out lightly. That is quite a prestigious position, given how important Adrian Newey's books are for the entire Formula 1 community who wants to know the technical side. Not to mention, you sometimes do have to pay attention to what Fernando says. He's quite wily, he's quite cunning, he's quite coy and cheeky. He does let things slip a lot of the time. In fact, you could, in a way, say that maybe Fernando was partly to blame about the whole Spygate incident in 2007 getting leaked out with his conversations with Pedro de la Rosa, according to many interviews and documentaries on the topic. And considering how much the team values Fernando Alonso's word, Aston Martin, if Fernando put in a good word to Papa Stroll saying, "Hey, I'd like to work with Adrian Newey, and I think he'd be really good for our organisation. You were talking about winning so much, I want to win," I think that'd be the great package, especially Aston Martin's partners Honda and Aramco for 2026, since they're keen to aim for the Constructors' title that year. Now, I may have talked about this next reason before a couple of times, that Aston Martin's Valkyrie is a car that Adrian Newey designed, blah 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 blah, yeah okay, rinse and repeat. But this has been emboldened even further due to the fact that Aston Martin is not only going to be running one Valkyrie hypercar next year for Le Mans, they're going to be running 2 of them. That is a huge statement of intent right off the back of Alpine bringing back 2 of their A424s, even though they didn't last very long. But bringing in 2 cars is a clear indicator that they believe in the hypercar's capabilities, and being able to secure the services of the guy that originally designed it back in the day when Aston Martin and Red Bull were partnering one another, that could easily be a nice little salvo given how much Adrian Newey values and cherishes the idea of endurance racing and Le Mans. He himself competing in the 24-hour endurance race not that long ago. It was something of a personal challenge for him and something that he absolutely relished. So getting the chance to maybe just refine and tweak the original designs that he made back in the late 2010s, having come off the back of the RB17, the latest edition of the hypercar, maybe take some things on board that he's kept in his head there, and then bring it back to the original hypercar that he designed. Now it's actually seen the light of day, after having been shelved for a while because Aston Martin's financial future was quite uncertain, but now that it's not so much anymore, he's now probably quite happy that that car is now seeing the racetrack finally, after years of maybe seen as a rich man's hobby being sold for £1 to £2 million. Although that's seemingly the case for the RB17 now, so swings and roundabouts, to which Milton Keynes has plenty of. And yes, of course, Ferrari could probably offer the same plum to him to aid their hypercar division, and it's already doing quite well, but it wouldn't be his car. I mean, not until the 499P is replaced, which won't be for a few more years yet, or until the regulations change drastically. The Valkyrie though? Oh no, that's Adrian Newey's completely. So I think Aston Martin's got one over Ferrari, because sure, potentially in the future Adrian Newey might get to design one, or a modified 499P, but Valkyrie, all the way. Another thing that makes me reckon that Aston Martin could be Newey's new home is that the team is vocally talking about their current car as being a handful. As Mike Crack says right here, the car is quite tough to drive, and we have not managed to cure that so far. So what we need is a car more benign, easier to extract potential, give them more confidence. If you lack confidence in your car, then you cannot go for the maximum. You have to take margin, and you are much more exposed to these small gaps that we are having these days. And then you can end up on the wrong side of it. And then you start a race much, much further back, and there is no point. So it's up to us to fix these issues. I would be happy if I could tell you in 2 races we have fixed everything. We're working hard on it to cure these problems, and we are trying to bring these updates as quick as possible. Crack also mentions that the team is looking to become a top and bigger team, and this is something that Red Bull were hoping to do back in the post-Jaguar era when they signed Newey up, and look how that turned out. Newey back then was keen for a challenge after doing so well at McLaren and Williams and becoming disillusioned with the entire thing. So Red Bull, that was quite a nice place for him to stay for a while, until he became disillusioned there. Can you see a pattern there? And yet another thing which could make it likely that Newey goes there is the fact that Honda's going there. Newey has experience with the Honda power unit from 2019 when they joined Red Bull. So having that continuity at Aston Martin now could be another sweetener for Aston Martin to actually go along with a very, very pricey season package of £25 million a year. It means that he and his future team can create something that will complement the power unit as best as it can, given that Newey's own comments regarding chassis and power units for 2026 mean a lot. I seriously feel for Dan Fallows right now. He was meant to be the saviour of Aston Martin, a Red Bull acquisition, and perhaps maybe the comments from Christian Horner downplaying Fallows' contributions to the car were actually legit, because I remember a lot of comments from them saying that, oh, look at that, it's the green Red Bull, oh, Dan Fallows, A lot of us at the time were thinking, oh, that's just Christian being a sourpuss for losing that kind of talented designer, but maybe there was an element of truth to that. And he certainly put himself in the firing line and either to be sacked or demoted or moved to another department for failing to capitalise on the AMR 23's initial good fortune, because this year, it's looking obvious that the AMR 24 will not produce the same results, and have had the same head start that its predecessor had, with Alonso not even aiming high anymore, and expecting at best to be fighting for 8th. Sure, that doesn't sound too bad given the current situation of Formula 1, but when you look back to 2023, when Aston Martin was starting to get used to the notion of finishing in 3rd and maybe getting the occasional cheeky 2nd place, something that became the plum of McLaren's later in the year, this is a very major come down. Aston Martin were hoping to stick to their 5-year plan, which last year was looking odds-on to be retained. This year, they were supposed to be going for victories, and Ferrari and McLaren are able to do that, not Aston Martin. Mercedes were close in Canada, just Aston Martin, no, that plan's completely fallen flat. Now, this is all well and good, Adrian Newey going to Aston Martin. It does sound like a logical match with many perks for Newey to get stuck into, and not that bad of a commute either. And the new factory could easily accommodate his workflow into theirs as they're getting it up to speed, whereas Ferrari would take some time and compromise to make it work. But there is something to consider here, something that completely derailed the efforts of Toyota and BMW back in the 2000s, although you could also argue that Toyota were just stubborn in general and not hiring people from within the world of Formula 1 and thinking that, oh, Toyota could do it themselves. It's the idea of throwing money at problems and thinking it will automatically work. Sure, Adrian Newey could understandably go for a slightly higher pay package, but this is a huge amount of money to commit at a time when Formula 1 is going through a major technical regulation change, and no one's quite sure about how it's going to end up come 2026. Are the cars going to be majorly slower? The characteristics going to be odd? Will it not be the pinnacle of the sport anymore? There are so many unknowns and uncertainties going into it, and although I do appreciate that Adrian Newey is going into it with a very optimistic look and seeking a challenge, I don't necessarily think that is going to yield big blockbuster results right from 2026. It's going to take a little bit of time for Newey to bed himself in. And sure, having the luxury of starting in 2025 is all well and good, and Newey could be locked away until 2026 to work on that car exclusively, whereas Fallows gets a stay of execution for 2025 and then his future remains uncertain. The point is, though, is that success cannot be guaranteed for Aston Martin, especially when you've got a lot of variables with the Honda power unit of 2026, even though Newey also admits that maybe Honda was catered to for those regulations to make sure they came back for the billionth time. That is something to consider there as well. If Papa Stroll's team hopes Newey will come in and instantly win races, throwing money at problems, then it might not happen. And there's no urgency from Newey either. He's got plenty of money, he's got nothing left to prove other than to simply have some fun, take up the challenge, and if it doesn't work out for him, he can then retire, no biggie. And whilst I think him going to Ferrari is a nice idea, and it might be a cute little way of wrapping up a major super team like they got in the Schumacher era of the 90s and 2000s, logistically, I just don't think it works, and Ferrari are quite good with what they've got right now, and signing Lewis Hamilton is pretty much all they need now got to do. That's all they have to do to make sure they've got the complete package in the way that they want, for Sir and Elkan. Right now, Papa Stroll is still trying to find that super team. Sure, Honda is really good right now, and their recent track record cannot be denied. Aramco does have plenty of money to invest in the team. although admittedly their reputation is something that is a little bit questionable, and their desire can be a little bit ruthless. And then of course there's Fernando Alonso. You've got the hungriest driver out there who wants to work with Newey and hopefully can make it happen. But then you've also got to make a car that works with Lance Stroll. And that is a thing to really consider here, and that is a very major issue that is currently dogging the team at the moment. Them looking at 6th place in the Constructors very seriously, considering that Racing Bulls is bringing upgrades that work, whereas Aston Martin can't. Maybe that's the reason they're bringing Newey, to save themselves from embarrassment, especially this year. Something I go into more detail in this video here that you can go and watch next. The idea of Aston Martin not being 5th is a real major possibility, and it shouldn't happen.